Hi, today we are going to learn one of the best weapon against E4. Yes, it's Sicilian Accelerated Dragon. Even top GMs at high level use this opening. Okay, so E4, C5, Sicilian defense, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and g6. Here, white has two main options. One is c4, another one is knight c3. First, let's see knight c3. Bishop g7, threatening to win the knight. So obvious move, bishop e3, knight f6. Now, once again, white has two main options. One is bishop c4, another one is knight takes c6. Also, white can play f3, but it's not a great move. For f3, we can just make castle. If white plays queen d2, we can just go for the d5 break, which is a very important idea in Sicilian defense. If white stops d5 by playing bishop c4, now we can play queen b6, good move. We are threatening to win the pawn on b2. If white plays bishop b3, now we have knight takes e4 with the idea of bishop takes d4. So first let's see knight takes c6, then we can see the move bishop c4, which is a main move. So knight takes c6, obviously b takes c6. Now the idea behind knight takes c6 is to play e5. But there are some problems in e5 because when the pawn was on e4, it was controlling d5 and also f5 squares. But now it lost controls on these important light squares. So we can just go knight g8. And with this move, we can make use of this square by playing knight h6 and knight f5. And also, we can exploit this over pushed pawn. Here, white has two ways to defend this pawn. One is f4 and the other one is bishop d4. First, let's see bishop d4. For bishop d4, we have very nice move, queen a5. Once again, we are threatening to win the pawn. Again, white has two options. One is f4 and the other one is e6. Interesting move. Here we can just play knight f6, e takes f7 check, king takes f7, and bishop c4 check. If white plays moves like bishop e2 or bishop d3, we have e5, very nice move. So bishop c4, d5, bishop b3. Now, can you find the best move for black? Yeah, it's e5, brilliant move. Now white cannot take this pawn because if white takes, we can just play rook e8 and pinning the bishop. Again, only move for white is f4. That's the only way to win this bishop. And once again, we have very nice move in this position. Queen b6, good move. Because we are preventing white from castling. Now, white king will stuck in the center for some time. If white plays moves like queen d2 or queen f3 to make queenside castle, once again we have very nice move, bishop h6. Now, queenside castle is not possible because of rook takes e5. So this is completely fine for black. So for e5, if white plays bishop e3, we can just play rook e8, castle, and king g8. Black is completely fine. So instead of e6, if white plays f4, we can just play f6. Once again, threatening to win the pawn. If pawn takes f6, knight takes f6, and we can make castle. If queen e2, just pawn takes e5. Now only move for white is bishop takes e5 because if white plays pawn takes e5, it's a mistake. Now we can play rook d8, good move, threatening to win the pawn. If queenside castle, again bishop h6 check. Again, only move for white is bishop e3 because if white plays king b1, it's a mistake. How can you find the best move for black to win material? Yeah, it's a brilliant move. c5. We are threatening to win this bishop. If the bishop moves, we can take on c3 because the pawn is on pin. So here bishop e3 is the only move and we can play queen b4 threatening to win the pawn. After bishop takes h6, don't take on b2 immediately because if you take on b2, king d2, knight takes h6 and rook b1 is losing for black. So don't take on b2. First you can just take on h6 anyway. White cannot save this pawn. So here pawn takes e5 is a mistake. So the best move is bishop takes e5, and we can just play knight f6, castle, castle. Once again, black is doing great. So now let's see, instead of bishop d4, what if white plays f4? That's what we are going to see now. For f4, like I mentioned before, we can just play knight at 6 and making use of this f5 square. So queen d2, castle, castle, and d6. Interesting move. Pawn takes d6. In this position, black has two options. One is simple pawn takes d6. Another one is very interesting move, knight f5. I prefer knight f5 in this position because e takes d6, queen takes d6, queen takes, rook takes d6, knight f5, double attack. So only move rook d3, bishop a6, again only move bishop c5. All these moves are forcing moves till the end game. So bishop takes f8, bishop takes f1, bishop takes g7, bishop takes g2, rook g1, king takes g7, rook takes g2, and rook e8. Now black has slight advantage, but I prefer knight f5. Interesting move in this position. Anyway, white cannot take on e7 immediately because if white takes on e7, queen takes e7, threatening to win the bishop, and bishop f2. Then bishop e6, finishing our development. Now black is doing great in this position. And if white plays some moves like some aggressive moves like g4, it's completely mistake in this position. Now, can you find the best move for actually a winning move for black? Yeah, it's rook a b8. It's a brilliant move. There's no need to defend this one because if white takes this knight, we can play queen b4, threatening checkmate. Only move b3. Now, bishop takes c3 is not a good idea because after queen d6, white can defend the position. So once again, very nice move. Rook b d8. If queen takes d8, now queen a3 check. If king goes to b1, bishop takes c3, threatening checkmate on d2. If king goes to d2, we can just take on d8. This is completely winning for black. So taking on e7 is not a great idea. So bishop f2 is the best move. Now, once again, the brilliant move for black is rook b8. Actually, now white has two options. One is d7, another one is d into e7. Yeah, for d7, actually, we can just sacrifice our bishop. Yes, it looks crazy, right? But after queen takes d7, queen a5, black have great compensation in this position. Now, it's not easy for white to play the accurate moves. Even at some point, white has to give the material back to defend its king. For example, let me just show you a few more moves. So queen takes a7, queen b4, then queen b2, queen a3, queen takes f4 check, only move. Rook d2 because white is losing his bishop on f2. So rook d2 is the only move. And first rook a8, queen b3, bishop h6 threatening to win the rook. So bishop e1 only move and rook f b8. So black involved all of his pieces into the attack, but still this rook and bishop is sleeping. So after this, it's not easy for white to play the accurate moves. So d takes e7 is the another option. Obviously, queen takes e7. And once again, the only move for white is bishop c4 because now we are threatening to play rook takes b2, king takes b2, and queen b4 check. So bishop c4 is the only move. Bishop e6, bishop b3, and after c5, black is doing great. Now we are going to see the main move against Accelerated Dragon, which is bishop c4. Also, I like to mention this sideline, bishop e2. For bishop e2, you can just make castle, castle. Here, if you want to equalize and play a simple game, you can just go for d5. So pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d4, bishop takes, queen takes, bishop takes g7, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, king takes g7, and bishop f3, bishop f5. It's completely equal. But actually, I prefer d6 in this position. So for d6, f4, bishop d7, and queen d2, rook c8, rook a d1, and black is doing great. Obviously, white cannot play f5 immediately because we have knight e5. And also, we have multiple options in this position. For example, we can play knight g4 or a6 b5, or you can just trade on d4, bishop takes d4, and bishop c6. So black has multiple options in this position. Now let's see the main move, bishop c4, castle. Once again, white have few options here. The main move is bishop b3, and f3 is a dubious move, like I mentioned before. Do you remember this move? We can just play queen b6, good move, hoping to win the pawn. Bishop b3 and knight takes e4 with the idea of bishop takes d4. Also, white can play castle here. So many players prefer knight takes e4, knight takes e4, d5. Once again, simplifies the position. But I prefer d6. So first of all, we are threatening knight g4. So h3. For h3, we can just go for knight a5. Now, white has two options. One is bishop b3 and the one is bishop b3, bishop d3. If bishop b3, you can just play b6, bb7, and rook c8. Excellent play for. If bishop d3, a very nice move. E5. Actually, it looks like a bad move, right? Because it weakens our d5 square. Also, d6 pawn becomes backward. But after knight b3, bishop e6 with the idea of d5. Now, d5 break is unstoppable. Also, we have great play in the center. So now let's see the main move, bishop b3. Here, black has multiple ideas like a5, d6. Many moves are there, but I prefer the interesting move, rook e8. So with rook e8, sometimes white can play queen d2, bishop h6. So instead of trading your bishop, you can just return your bishop because now your rook is not on f8. That's the main idea behind rook e8. And also sometimes you can open up the e file and create active play using your rook. So rook e8 is a very interesting move. Here, white can play castle. For castle, once again d6, again threatening knight g4. So h3. For h3, knight a5. Here white has two options. One is active move. For another one is queen d2. For queen d2, we can just play a6 and bishop h6. Like I said before, we can just retain the bishop, bishop h8. And next we can play b5, bb7 and rook c8. Once again, good play for. And if white plays active move f4, we can go for b6 with the idea of bb7 rook c8. If e5, we can just take on b3 fast. Here pawn takes f6 is not a great option because first we can just take on d4. And again pawn takes g7 is a mistake because after knight f5, bishop f2, bb7, we can take this pawn anytime. So it will be a pawn up. And if pawn takes e7, first knight e2 check, interesting move. Queen takes e2, queen takes e7, rook a e1, and queen d7. Black's doing well with the bishop path. So for knight takes b3, if pawn takes b3, we can just play d takes e5, d takes e5, and knight d5. Once again, black is doing great. Also, white have this weak pawn. Here, instead of castle, white can also try f3. Here, black has two options. One is slow but steady e6 and d5. Another one is d5. I like d5 in this position because after e takes d5, knight b4, we can regain the pawn. If white tries to keep the pawn, we can play the nice move here. E6. So pawn takes e6, bishop takes e6. Now we are threatening to play bishop takes b3 and rook takes e3. Also, still white's king is in the center. So black have a great compensation for the pawn. Now we are going to learn the final main line e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, g6, and c4. Maroczy bind setup. Generally, Maroczy bind considered as one of the strongest line against many of the Sicilian defenses. But against Sicilian Accelerated Dragon, I feel very comfortable from black side. because I feel at some point white lacks plans. Let me show you why. So here we can go knight f6, knight c3, and bishop g7. Here bishop e3 is the best move because if you play bishop e2, it's a mistake because after knight takes e4, this is better for. So bishop e3, castle, bishop e2, d6, castle, bishop d7, queen d2. Now, can you try to understand the position and find the best plan for black? In this position, black lacks space. We don't have enough space to maneuver our pieces. So, the best move is knight takes d4. We are trading one of our piece to gain some space for other pieces. So, after bishop takes d4, we can play bishop c6. We are getting this square for our bishop and also threatening to win the pawn. So, f3. Now, white have plans like b4, b5. So, first we are playing a5 to prevent b4. So white have to play b3 here. Otherwise, we will play a4. For example, if white plays rook a c1, then play a4. And in future, we can play moves like queen a5. With a4, we are gaining more space on the queen side. So for a5, b3. Now the best move for black is knight d7. Yes, we are trading our dragon bishop. Actually, most of the players will hesitate to trade dragon bishop. But in this position, dark square bishop is more important for white than us because most of white's pawns are in light squares. So he needs his dark square bishop. If he trades his dark square bishop, he has lot of dark square weakness. So bishop e3 is the best move in this position, and we are activating our knight with knight c5 and rook a c1. Here black have two plans. One is a solid queen b6. Here we are also threatening to play queen b4 and sometimes a4. So knight b5 is the important move. And rook f c8. So this is very solid. Here I prefer the aggressive option, bishop e5. Obviously f4 is not possible because we can just take on c3 and we can win the pawn. So rook f d1, and once again interesting move, e6. We are opening up this diagonal for our queen. We cannot play queen h4 immediately. Queen h4 will work in some positions, so we have to calculate and make decisions when queen h4 will work, when it won't work. But we can just improve our position with queen e7 and f5, and we can play queen h4 when it. That's all for today. You try this excellent opening and let me know if you have any doubts in the comments. I hope you learned something useful from this video. Do subscribe for more chess improvement content. See you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.